I'm going to probably create some political turmoil here. My opinion is that we do not have a shortage.
Okay.
My opinion is that the system that they are trying to run doesn't function on a fixed number. So if you can endlessly access a service as much as you want, so the general public of Canada can see a doctor every day if they want.
Right.
For no reason. I can just stand in line and be like, hey, I just felt like hanging out, and I can leave.
Yeah.
If I'm going to not create a certain amount of boundaries or expectations on those using the system, then my system needs to be exponentially big.
Yeah.
If I create a boundary and say, when you use the system, these are the requirements, or if the system is used unnecessarily, there's a penalty, then suddenly I can create a fixed system where I can say, well, 20 doctors would be enough if people were using it appropriately.
Right.
So when we look at it, there's a system flaw in that, because every Canadian can see a doctor for everything, and I'm not saying I don't want people to have access.
No.
It's beautiful that you can. But you can come see me every day, and I had many, many patients who would do this.
Yeah.
For every little thing, right? Doctor, my hand is blue. I am not kidding you. I had a patient that came in and said, doctor, my hand is blue.
Yeah.
I had a look at the patient and I said, well, for how long? Well, since this morning, I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
I made them go wash their hands. It was the blue dye from the new jeans they bought.
Yeah. Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us around the world, is saying, okay, we know Canada, we know British Columbia is beautiful. Where are you in British Columbia? Well, Prince George is about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And it is a beautiful, beautiful natural place, all of nature all around us. Today, a very special day, and this is a special, very, very special person, and her name is Dr. Tracey Lotze, who is a personal friend, a medical doctor for me, together with her partner, Jason, and she's special because she was trained as a medical doctor in South Africa, family doctor and an emergency medicine physician. Mm-hmm. She got a training in South Africa, came then to Canada, to British Columbia, in fact, in northern British Columbia. So she will tell us all about it. Tracey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, John, and it's so good to be here again. I feel like just the other day, but I think it's been, a year or a year and a half since we did our first one together.
Time goes so quick, doesn't it?
It goes way too fast. So this is excitingly the third one.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah, and I had you...
I love it.
Yeah, and then the other part is not only have we been podcasting together and we are friends together, but also you have written the foreword to one of my books, ADHD Unlocked, that was very interesting, and Tracey will talk about that a little bit at some point. And then the other thing, both Tracey and Jason wrote the foreword to...
For the new one, Living Young, Dying Old.
Dying Old.
Which is the only way to live.
Which is the only way to live.
Yes.
And again, Tracey is very much involved in that, and she will talk about that. And obviously as a medicine doctor and having all that knowledge, I look at your bio and it is so extensive. So tell me and tell our guests about that. You got your training. Why did you go into medicine to start with? So
I'll try and keep it brief, but I guess I tend to love my life. And I've been very blessed that since the age of 6, I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I knew I wanted to live in Canada. This was just a dream that I'd had since as long as I can remember. My parents never finished high school, went to university. Back in those days, you would leave school at 16, get a job, and stay at that and work that way. So no one in my family is in the medicine. I didn't know anyone in Canada, or I can't even say that I ever heard about it. I must have heard about it somehow, because that's how I wanted to figure out to live here. And I spent most of my youth and my high school time making sure that what I needed to do was get into med school. And then once I was in med school and doing that, I made sure that I had all of the paperwork and all of the, all of the things that I needed to get my licensing in Canada.
Johannesburg or?
Cape Town. So I studied at University of Cape Town, which is really beautiful. You're right nestled in on Table Mountain, which is absolutely gorgeous. So a really fabulous medical program. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better training.
Right.
Did my internship which is a year that we do after medical school. I went to Mpumalanga province, which is a kind of a province in the west of South Africa.
Right.
Spent a year there, very, very rural, and then came back to Cape Town and did emergency medicine there afterwards before I moved to Canada.
Right. And so when did you move to Canada? Now, coming to Canada is not all that easy necessarily.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess this again where I'm really now at this age understanding how blessed I was to have the insight to do all the things that I did. Right. So while I was doing my training, I had looked into what paperwork I might need for Canada so that I had you have to get documents signed off from every head of department at certain parts of your training, which have to be dated in certain times, verifying that you're appropriate to work. And all of this goes with, all these application forms and personal paperwork and stuff that they need when you're applying here.
Right.
And I'd actually done that as I was doing my training. So by the time I was done, I had it ready. Didn't have to run around and go find other people, different parts of the country again. I mean, we do know in South Africa, you may never find that person again to do the thing you need, right? I mean, we have a very large population, and it's not because people don't want to, it's just people are busy. To even get hold of somebody in that department and get the message across would have been a lot of work. And I had it all ready by the time I was ready to do my application.
How many people live in South Africa, just out of curiosity?
Almost 50 million.
50 million?
So 50 million people in a country just larger than the province of BC.
Yeah, somehow I have the vision that it is much bigger than it really is, right?
And I mean, if we think that the population of Canada is probably only about 40 million people.
40, yeah.
So it's 10 million people more. The entire population of Canada with another 10 million in the province of BC and just slightly spilling over to Alberta. Yeah. It's quite large, but I can't say that I ever felt like there were too many people though.
Right.
Like it didn't feel like, it doesn't feel like what you visualize in Japan and those kind of places where you see so many people and such, such high density. There are large areas of South Africa that are completely uninhabited.
Yeah.
We have very large areas that are dedicated natural sanctuaries for the animals. So if you think about it, actually, we probably have 50 million people living in half of the province of BC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So when you applied to go to Canada, did you have decided you want to go to British Columbia, or was it just Canada?
Some of the logistics with where we could work in Canada. So each province is licensed individually.
Okay.
So as a South African, I mostly only had an option in BC. BC had, let's say, a single step process.
Yeah.
If you were looking at Saskatchewan and Alberta, it was almost like a two-step process, which just meant a lot more money and a lot more time. Okay, so you'd have to do a certain amount of training or do a certain exam, then spend a certain amount of time and be under supervision, and then they would clear you. Where BC basically accepted my degree and my training and grandfathered me in, and I could start working right away under supervision and then challenge the exams.
But then they wanted you to go to northern BC because that's where they needed medical doctors. At
the time when I moved to Canada, which was in 2008, halfway through, the medical system was still more stable. It wasn't perfectly stable, it was more stable. And what they would identify is that northern BC and more smaller towns were still more in need than the big cities.
Yeah.
So what they did was, as foreign graduates, or IMGs as we're called, international medical graduates, as we would come into Canada, we would get an easier route in or have less logistics if we were applying in areas that needed more physicians.
Right.
If I was trying to apply in Vancouver, I would have to prove that I was needed above a local physician.
Right.
Where in northern BC and other smaller towns, we know there's a need. So they would happily then make the application process easier.
So you started then, when was this about?
So if I remember correctly still, it was June 6th, 2008 is when I arrived in Vancouver. Had to do some interviews on the 7th, and then on the 8th I moved up to Fort St. James. Now, I didn't know where Fort St. James was. I didn't look on a map. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
This was the dream, and I was following with the dream, and I believed it would take me where I needed to be.
So Fort St. James would about be north?
About 2
west,
hours northwest
about 2 hours
from Prince George.
You know, so, and so there you came to Fort St. James.
So from a city of about 4 million people, Cape Town, 4.5 million people.
About 10, 15,000 people in Fort St. James?
3,500.
3,500.
3,500 is the population. Might shoot up to about 5,000 or 6,000 at that time during the summer.
No hospital.
Small
medical
hospital,
center.
12-bed hospital.
12 bed.
12 bed. Small medical clinic. And you're at the end, like you're at an end point. So, I mean, you could drive from there to other places, but you kind of land on Stewart Lake, which is always a shipping point for northern BC, and a lot of First Nations reserves around it as well. So really made the medicine super interesting and very kind of threw you into the different cultural aspects of medicine quite quickly as well, which was really nice. I enjoyed that.
Totally different, real challenge, really.
Yeah. A real challenge understanding the culture and then still being spoiled with, let's say, first world medicine at that time, having more access to more drugs and different instruments and things like that, where in South Africa, I might be working in a clinic or a hospital where, like, as simple as, let's say we need to put you asleep and I need to use a gas mask. Well, we don't have any more gas masks. What do? Well, you cut a 2-liter Coke bottle in, you cut the end off, put the hose in the end and use that as a gas mask. Like we were MacGyvering things on a day-to-day base, never mind the medicine. Yeah. Now I moved to Canada and I have everything I need. It was nice to be able to be like, oh, I just have this instrument that I need. Beautiful.
So so was the system quite different here? Here we have universality. Yes. Medical care, right? So where the government pays for virtually all the things that are required. What was the system in South Africa?
So South Africa has a 2-tier system. They do have the government-based system, but unfortunately in the government-based system, it is largely underfunded. We have a large population, so now you're dealing with 30 to 40 million people that need to use this system in a system that doesn't have enough funding. So you would take your own blanket to the hospital if you were being admitted. You would probably need your family to bring you some food. There wasn't always enough meals. Yeah. So that was our government-based system. And then we had a private system which outsurpasses Canada probably 10 to 1. Yeah. I can walk into a private hospital. I can get an MRI within an hour, see the specialist, in the same hour, have it reported, do everything I need. But again, that was a paid system. Yeah. Yeah.
So how long were you in Fort St. James?
So Fort St. James, about 3.5 years. Then I moved to Prince George, which was just really an evolution, and I just kind of followed the evolution. I wanted to do more emergency medicine as I'd done in South Africa. Fort St. James has a small hospital. We had lots of little emergency stuff there, but I wanted to move to a bigger tier center. So I had started working at the Prince George Hospital in the emergency department, and I was driving in and out. And then I think it was the beginning of 2012, I moved here and took on more of a kind of a full-time position there and some clinic work.
Yeah, and then we have a regional hospital here, and then we also have the University of Northern British Columbia
Yes.
that has a medical.
Yes, they have their
Teaching.
own kind of teaching facility here where we actually do a Northern medical program as part of the UBC program.
And you were teaching there
Yes,
as well, right?
yeah.
And so and you have been here. So I got to know you when you were here in Prince George, and then your partner Jason Boxhart is also a doctor. He's a naturopathic doctor.
Yes.
And and a good friend. So he was practicing here. You were practicing medicine in the walk-in clinic at the hospital, and then
we slowly kind of merged our medicine together. So
Right.
Jason's practice was largely men's health, sports medicine, longevity, how to do disease prevention. So in Canada, unfortunately,
very proactive already,
Yes.
right?
very
Longevity.
proactive. In Canada, as a medical doctor, we're really trained to, or kind of it's indoctrinated to treat disease.
Right.
We're not doing disease prevention very
Right.
much.
No.
And we're not doing any anti-aging or longevity. That's not considered a priority.
Right.
Right. Because it's a generalized system. We don't have time to prevent stuff. Although prevention saves, long-term saves every platform more money than
Right.
treatment. Unfortunately, the Canadian government believes very much in just treating disease. So I was in a very treatment-focused mindset. I'm treating my patients. At times I'm doing prevention, but it's very minimal. It's not necessarily my skill.
Right.
Met Jason when we were training. So we were both training for the Wheeling Warriors, the cancer fundraising team. Became good friends, and started kind of talking about our medicine more. And here I'm being exposed a lot more to kind of longevity medicine, anti-aging medicine, and preventative medicine.
Right.
And over time started incorporating that into my practice more and realizing how important it was. Yeah.
Now, one of the delicate things is, and I don't want to get into politics, obviously we don't do that, but I can make an observation from my perspective is that we have a shortage of medical doctors in Canada, I believe, in particular in BC, that I'm most familiar with. And although we are training docs, but still it's a problem, and a very serious problem.
Yes.
But a lot of people have
Yeah.
no doc. And then we also have challenges in terms of qualified nurses that again are very, very critical and very, very important. And nursing again falls into different categories, and you are the expert, not me, but saying that if you have a medical nurse that is supporting a medical doc, they have to have certain qualities.
Yes.
And then there are another level of surgeons, even more critical, that are in operating rooms
Yes,
and in
yes.
hospitals, very,
Yeah.
very delicate.
Yeah.
But we have a shortage of those.
I'm going to probably create some political turmoil here. My opinion is that we do not have a shortage.
Okay.
My opinion is that the system that they are trying to run doesn't function on a fixed number. So if you can endlessly access a service as much as you want, so the general public of Canada can see a doctor every day if they want.
Right.
For no reason. I can just stand in line and be like, hey, I just felt like hanging out, and I can leave.
Yeah.
If I'm going to not create a certain amount of boundaries or expectations on those using the system, then my system needs to be exponentially big.
Yeah.
If I create a boundary and say, when you use the system, these are the requirements, or if the system is used unnecessarily, there's a penalty, then suddenly I can create a fixed system where I can say, well, 20 doctors would be enough if people were using it appropriately.
Right.
So when we look at it, there's a system flaw in that because every Canadian can see a doctor for everything, and I'm not saying I don't want people to have access.
No.
It's beautiful that you can. but you can come see me every day. And I had many, many patients who would do this.
Yeah.
For every little thing, right? Doctor, my hand is blue. I am not kidding you. I had a patient that came in and said, doctor, my hand is blue.
Yeah.
I had a look at the patient and I said, well, you know, for how long? Well, since this morning, I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah.
I made them go wash their hands. It was the blue dye from the new jeans they'd bought.
Yeah.
Right. So if we create certain expectations of the patients, suddenly it takes off some of the workload.
Yeah.
Now, if the workload is reduced to what is more realistic, the number of doctors that are working could probably manage better.
Yeah.
And therefore, we suddenly wouldn't have this dramatic shortage.
So, without going in too deeply,
Yes.
but how would we create I have, from my perspective, is saying that if it would cost me $10.
So that was, you know, that's one concept where you say, the patient needs to pay, and if the doctor deems it medically appropriate, they get a refund.
Right.
Right. So if we don't make it a large barrier, we make it a small barrier. And of course, you have patients on disability and patients on welfare and things like that. And there would be certain nuances that might be waived for them.
Yeah.
But if we create a small onus where you're going to get a small penalty, the second component to this, and I'm now one of those who are as guilty of this as many others. So this would be me outing me of my own flaw now. I spent 10 years prior to this working 6 to 7 days a week, every day of the year. You guys know that. I was seeing 65 patients a day every day, and I still loved it every day. And now I work three to 4 days a week.
Right.
Right. So in a system as well, which allows physicians somewhat to regulate their own time. I'm not arguing this because I do love it. The new generation of physicians are not interested in working as we did before. And I put myself with the old generation. I graduated in 2005. I have worked every night, worked every day, and I will continue to do that if that's what's required. But if we now allow people to work 3 days a week, how many people do you need to do the same job? If all of the guys at your, where you do all the lumber and that, were only working 3 days a week, how many staff would you need? You would need double the amount.
Yeah.
Is there really a shortage, or are they not working sufficiently?
Exactly.
So I'm not saying this to create problems, but
No,
there's a
but
secondary reality. And I'm going to throw another spanner in the works, and this may make me very unpopular amongst female colleagues, in that the ones who are the worst for this are my female colleagues.
Yeah.
Right? And I understand that many women do want to preferably have a lifestyle job, but you cannot pick a career which requires you working 4 to 5 days a week and then say, I'm going to work 2.5 days and I'm going to raise my kids.
Right.
Because you're doing a disservice to the medical industry. If that's what you want, I would actually suggest go be a nurse, not because I'm trying to insult them, but because nurses work 4 days on and 4 days off.
Yeah.
You'd be able to create a lifestyle around that. But as a physician, we're training all these physicians. When we look at the numbers coming from the university, we go, there should be enough. But then the physician is allowed to work 2 days a week.
Yeah.
So how is that ever going to be enough? There isn't a shortage. There is a shortage of physicians working appropriate number of time, which means those that still have work ethic and from the older generation are now being burnt out because they're having to carry the load.
Right.
Because no one's stepping in and helping them.
Yeah.
2 days a week doesn't help me 5 days a week.
Now, if I look at that, Tracey, and I have seen that here, and we all know it, right? And
nobody wants to say it because.
But I compliment you for saying it. I do that as well. I'm in as it relates to the forest industry and other things. Is that how does that compare to other places that do that more proactive, like Sweden, Holland, France, Germany? But why are those?
Why are they more successful?
Yeah.
Number one, because their country and I don't want to say their health industry there focuses from a very young age on preventative medicine.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of saying, let's check everything and let's do everything, it's like, how do we prevent things? And we learn this from an early age. How do we focus on healthier food, healthier habits, those kind of behaviors? And how do we teach people that when you're living healthier lifestyle, when your hand turns blue, it's probably not something unless there are other symptoms involved. So these populations are trained from a younger age. And I can say even in South Africa, we didn't go to the doctor unless you were dying. I mean, you would never see the doctor unless you'd had your bronchitis for at least a week and it wasn't getting better, because you didn't run to the doctor with everything. So when we did, the doctor was able to spend their time with you, examine you, and because they're living more preventative lifestyles.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because there are more established nations. Canada is a very young country in the world.
Yeah.
It's 200 years old.
Yeah.
It hasn't had the extra 100 years of learning by its own errors.
Right.
And obviously, being an independent country, it wants to make a lot of its decisions as if it's making it for the first time. Yeah. Unfortunately, instead of paying attention to other well-developed older countries that have been through this, that have learned certain systems don't work, and have now evolved into systems that are much better, Canada's wanting to do it on its own.
Yeah.
And again, not trying to insult anyone in the government. These are just my observations as a South African, and South Africa is 360 years old.
Yeah.
We've been through the trenches and back, and it doesn't mean that we're better, but some of our decisions are made on the fact that we've also watched things deteriorate.
Yeah.
And then learn from that.
You see, what is really troubling is that because of people that with very minor issues they go to a doc,
yeah,
then that will adversely affect people that really need it.
Exactly.
Because there's only so much time, and I know a lot of people in the profession that are burned out because it becomes so exhausting and there's nothing you can do about it. And for all intents and purposes, you can't complain about it or say anything about it because that is politically delicate.
Well, it's not that I don't want patients to have access, but we need to have, the population needs to become more mindful.
Yeah.
They can't all keep complaining there's no doctors when they keep running to the doctor because they bumped their toe and there was, you and I would if the toe wasn't gushing blood or half dangling off our foot, we'd put our shoe back on and not even mention it to our parents if we were kids for at least 3 days because we knew we were fine, right? We were trained to feel confident in understanding that the body is resilient.
Yeah.
And that is lost. And I can say Canada because I'm only working here. I feel like that is lost in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is something happening in that direction other than that? And obviously we wrote about it, in my book, Living Young, Dying Old, and then being more proactive about longevity.
Yeah.
And you and Jason are very proactive in that area.
Yes.
We'll talk about that as well. Is that I see more people talking about quality of life, longevity, but it's a slow process. And the system is not changing, and at the same time, private
medicine is shunned upon. It's taboo in Canada. It's not a system that's supported.
Yeah,
I mean,
and for all about that, but for all intents and purposes, it really is being discouraged, even legally discouraged.
Yes.
But then it's kind of. It doesn't make sense because, from my perspective, I'm well off, relatively speaking, and any kind of medicine that I want is as far away as the airport. Yeah. Because I go to a plane, I go to the United States, Mexico, whatever I want to go, and I get what I want. Yeah. So why are we not recognizing it here and saying that how do we recognize that for all the reasons that we said earlier, that for all little things we are tying up the medical system why not are we doing something about it? Because it's now becoming a serious problem for people that have serious
conditions,
issues, where they need
and that need access.
And they need access.
I mean, unfortunately, all I can say is talk is cheap in this country. And I don't mean that again in a political standpoint. I mean that from people are quick to say that they want a solution, but they're not quick to be part of the solution.
No.
Right? Canadians want a solution, but Canadians are not prepared to always step up and change the lifestyle. They don't want to be accountable for their actions. They know in Canada, and again, we're speaking Northern BC is the bulk of my exposure, so I apologize if I'm lumping all of Canada into this. Let's say my experience in BC and Northern BC is that people know there's such a quick fix by the government. So if something's wrong, I get some EI, I don't have to work. I don't have to take it serious. You know, if I'm overweight, I get an exemption. I mean, if I can't do my job, they have to put in a fancier chair because my back hurts. Instead of saying, how about get fitter, lose weight, become more agile, deal with it in a more preventative way.
Feel better.
They don't want to do that because that's too much work.
Yep.
So they're all going, I don't have a doctor, but many of them are not looking at ways, well, since I don't have a doctor, how about I start doing active prevention of disease, and then that way I don't need a doctor. I don't have a doctor.
No.
I mean, I'm one, so I know I can manage myself, but I don't have a doctor. And you know what? I'm not panicked by it because I feel like if I needed it, I would then go to a walk-in or I would go to emergency.
But I have a doctor, but I don't have a doctor because how often do I see you? Other than hardly ever.
You know, here and there. Yeah.
You know,
but like maybe because it's like, you're like, hey, maybe I should get a checkup because I feel good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not often.
And so at the same time, you know, saying that being preemptive, you know, like I'm going to be 84 in 3 months from now. You know, I still get up in the morning at 5:30. I always make my bed. I'm always in a hurry, and I
always make your bed.
Always.
Number one rule in life, and I've taught this to my kids: you do not leave the house. You don't go brush your teeth if your bed isn't made. It's the number one act of discipline in life, and nobody wants to see your bedroom with a messy bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I always think I'm late. You know, so but the point that I'm making is that although it took me quite a while before I got all my things in order, but I'm very proactive now in terms of the diet, sleep, obviously
movement and exercise.
All of those. And the benefit of it is that even at in my mid 80s, I feel good. I'm active. And this quality of life that is important. So one would say, hence the book, and more and more people speaking about it, and including
but
Jason.
You got to follow through, and you have proven that, like many others, talk is cheap. You took the challenge and you went with it, and you followed the advice. And that's the thing, when you live a preventative life, you don't need a ton of visits.
No.
You need a couple of visits to look at all the things we need to deal with, a couple of visits over time to look at certain testing and things that we may want to improve. And then it's up to you to do the job, which is in your book, you've proven. This is where the action plays out. You have now done what needed to happen, and you are living healthier than ever, despite aging.
Yeah.
Because you are living a preventative life.
Yeah.
And taking action.
And at the same time, you know, at my age, I can do all the things that I want to do. I'm very, very active. It is such a pleasurable life. All of things, there are only benefits. And why are we not doing more of it? Is it partially because I sometimes think, hence the book, hence what both you and Jason are doing, is with age less, is that understanding it sometimes can become complicated for a lot of people. So the simpler we make it in terms of how do I follow it and what do I do, then very quickly there will be rewards if you do the right thing.
It is, and the other thing I do notice as well is there's a slightly split system. So Jason's a naturopathic doctor. He's always done men's health, anti-aging, longevity, sports medicine with that. But there is a trend with many other natural providers that they, so there's a lot of supplements, there's a lot of things like this, and it becomes quite expensive for patients.
Yeah.
And that's a barrier to many people.
Yeah.
Right. And it may be part of a repertoire of what we want to do, but we also need to be able to tier what we can do to who the patient is. So if I have a patient that can only do so much as afford the healthier food, I don't need to force her to take some vitamins as well. I can give her other cheaper lifestyle things, like go outside and get the sunshine, do this, make sure you're picking these foods. We need to be able to do that. But when we're doing that, it's time consuming, right? And it needs to be tailored to each patient. And the Canadian medical system doesn't have the time for that because they're training us to only treat disease.
Yeah.
So these are appointments that are done where you're spending more time with them and working out those nuances.
Yeah.
So, and then once the patients have all of that understanding, and if they follow through over time, you will see the benefits.
So then between yourself and Jason, you started to become more proactive already in Prince George.
Yeah.
And you were kind of looking at, what can we do to do more on the preventive side?
Yeah.
And you started a company, Omnio Medical, and naturopathic medical clinic.
Yes, so we started that clinic online to allow patients to have more access to preventative medicine and, focusing on longevity, virility. And I use the term virility for both women and men. Both Jason and I are not getting any younger. He turned 57 yesterday. I'll be 44 in November because I know you and I are exactly 40 years apart.
Yeah.
And between the two of us, we're also aging. And even though we've always been very fit and healthy and proactive people, there are times where your body is hit and it's more than you might expect, and really kind of became more tangible to us that being more proactive than ever and teaching our patients that is the way to go forward.
Yeah.
I can treat all the diseases I want, but I'd only have to treat a quarter of that if I taught the patients prevention.
Yeah.
Which long term, if only a quarter of my patients are sick in their 60s and 70s compared to the numbers that would have been, I am taking off a large burden off the medical system.
Exactly.
And making it so much easier, but also improving a large percentage of people's quality of life.
Yeah.
So instead of now just saying, I'm treating your diabetes with medication, I prevented that you got diabetes.
Yeah.
So you're already going to have a better quality of life because you're not managing a disease.
Is the challenge for government that the benefits that are so obvious to you, me, and people that are involved are not tangible, that you can say, there it is, because what would have happened to this person, he would have been, she would have been, blah. It's not tangible. So
it's not tangible enough. Yes. So these are 10 to 20 year strategies.
Yeah.
Right. We're doing all of this now that I know as long as I stay on this route, I should never develop diabetes. My kidneys are healthy. I will never need cholesterol medication, any of these things. But it's not something that, and in many of these other countries, they have studied it.
Yeah.
They've proven that it works. But in Canada, because we want everybody to have access, we can't do the same system.
Yeah.
Because it takes too much time when we're shoulder deep in a system that's already overburdened with disease.
So that's why when we talked about the book, it was so important for me to write it, is that, that I said, how am I going to do this? And you've known me for a long time. How do I make it attractive? Is by putting a picture of me there at mid-80s, nearly 84.
Yeah.
And saying, that then kind of looks like...
He must know what he's talking about.
And that's the point.
That is the point. And that's where Jason and I, you know, it was funny, this weekend we were at a car show thing. They had one in Kelowna all weekend, and we were looking at some cars, and Jason was walking, and he's very well muscled, and he looks after himself, and we're walking, and there's these bunch of guys, and they're like, oh, you're looking good, you must be so young. And the guy's like, yeah, like, you know, I'm an old man. And Jason's like, no, I'm a pretty old guy, right? And these guys start telling us their age, and they're only a year or two or three older than I am. You know, they're still in their mid-40s. And Jason turned around and said, no, I'm 57. And like two of them almost fell off their chairs they were sitting on, going, what, you must be doing something. And he was like, his response to them was, this is my job.
Yeah.
I practice what I preach.
Yeah.
I look this good because I do what I sell to other people or what I preach to other people. I'm not preaching something and then doing the opposite. And
Right.
I live my life the same. Is I'm trying to show that I can be fit and healthy for my age if I do all the right things.
Yeah.
And that's what you're proving.
And what I found so interesting about it, and that's, you know, we are friends, obviously, but I admire in both of you is that you're walking the talk. And I used to have a doc, and unfortunately he passed away, but doctor that delivered our two daughters and was my doc and a family doc for well over 30 years. And you know, and he used to say to me, you know, I'm telling you what to do, but I'm not walking the talk. And you know, and so few people in the medical system, that I've noticed,
Are healthy.
are healthy. Why is that?
Because they don't, and I can honestly speak for my generation and older, they don't have time because we had work ethic.
Yeah.
We're working, now I can argue that because I stayed healthy throughout the entire time, working 6 days a week. I ran an Ironman, I cycled, I do multiple Tough Mudders. I choose to do that. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that they've dedicated their life to medicine, and in that process, given up their own health.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing a shift. The younger doctors are choosing to stay a little bit healthier, you know, getting more outside time, movement, spending time with their kids, doing all the things that are preventative, but in the process, they're costing the system that needs them in a job perspective.
Yeah.
So we can't have both the way it is at the moment. There has to be some accountability to minimum required amount of work or something like that. Yeah.
So the other thing the reason that I did this is, and that's what I look like even now. You find this interesting. I was doing a podcast with somebody, it was about 6-8 months ago. And so we were getting carried away. It was virtual. And then she said, take off your shirt. I said, and I did, you know, so, but yeah. So, but the point here is that the reason that I did this, and then the other part that I say about it is I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
There we go.
I've been saying that for a couple of years. Nobody has challenged me.
There we go.
And then we did the other part about it is I have been, and the pictures are in it where I'm competing, but the other one I did, and you probably saw the one that I did at Gold's here, is I'm not just making believe, I do it.
Yes.
And so the reason that I did is not so much look at John, but is precisely what you and Jason are doing, is saying that you're walking the talk. It can be done.
It can be done. And what you're proving, even more than what Jason and I are proving at our age, is that it's never too late.
Never.
I mean, you may be 60 and feel like it's too late. There's no ways you cannot do 10 years of prevention and be healthier at 70 than you were at 60. Even if you are morbidly obese, even if you already have diabetes, even if you have multiple issues going on, if you choose to take on the small amount of work that a more preventative lifestyle is, you will reap the greater rewards even more than you could ever imagine. And you're proving that. You're going, I feel amazing 5 years later compared to 5 years ago, even with even more with what you're doing now.
And it's not only physical,
yeah,
but you know it so well, and we haven't mentioned it to our guest that Tracey is also ADHD.
Yes, I am.
And it's a superpower for her. And as well is that it was 19 and oh, I don't know where my book is, but you know, I had another book here with the actual book that I bought, the ADHD in the store. Thanks, and you.
There we
This
go.
one.
Yes.
You know, so that's the book I picked up in 1997 and in the bookstore here, and ADHD. Up to that point, I already was, you know, then 67 years old.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then it was 57. And then it took me 5 years of looking at this book, and the more I found out about it, the more I knew it was a superpower, the more I thought about it. Then I finally went to my doc, and the same doc that I was for 30 years, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we looked at it, I do. Then I was 62 years old.
Yeah.
And it was only then that mentally that I got confidence that I never had really until I knew that part.
Yeah.
And then after that, you know, the going to the gym more seriously, and then
You realize the mental positive outcome from it, like how much your brain would calm down and feel more organized and less scattered.
all of that. And now I had the answer to it. Then I started to write the books. Then I did podcasting, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
And then so when I started to going to the gym in earnest, and I did that 15 years ago, and you know, so and I was already then virtually in my late 60s.
Yeah.
And then after I did that for about 6 years, somebody said, "Hey, have you ever thought about competing?" And I started then competing, and hence now that you're never too late.
It's never too late.
And then the same mentally in terms of you know, that you had so many people do not feel good about who they are, and reconciling that and trying to work, you know, to have the right mindset, the physical ability and the diet and all those things that are available.
And the other thing I think, the caveat to this as well, is that we're not saying that people aren't going to get sick despite all these changes. You and I know that any of us could have multiple things still happen. I mean, I had cancer in 2018. You know, things can go wrong, but when they then go wrong, you're also more likely to be able to either understand it quicker, right? So you would be able to go, this doesn't feel right, and I can trust it because I know my body. I know how well it works. I know how it functions. Or when you then go to the doctor, because you don't go all the time, they're also more likely to take you serious because you're not somebody who comes in frequently. And unfortunately, if you're going to come in all the time, eventually we're going to kind of, you know, not always trust everything you're saying. So there are those elements where the healthier you can live, when you do present to the doctor, you can present like things that are actually valid. You can go, this is going on, or that's going on, or this is not right, and I understand it because I have a good understanding of my own body.
And that's the key, right? So in that part, critically important. Hence then, how do we go from there to be getting more knowledge about our body? And that's where the next step comes into being more proactive and age less.
Yes.
Is an organization that both you and Jason got involved in. Yes. Tell us about Ageless.
So Ageless Living is a clinic. The owner is Michael Forbes from Vancouver Island. And there is an Ageless Living clinic based in Vancouver Island. There is one in Langley. And then we are the physicians working at the Kelowna branch. And why we love this brand so much is because it is essentially epitomizing this living young, dying old. So it has multiple tiers. We work on the medical side. So we do medical hormone optimization, weight management, disease prevention, We have a program now that will do certain genetic testing to see what things you may be predisposed to that you can start working on and eliminating. We also have the other components to that, in that we do skin care and anti-aging for the skin, which obviously is a big industry. And then the third component to that, which we're quite active about, is the biohacking. So with biohacking, these are things that may either happen in nature or you can recreate, which allow for longevity. So if we look at these, like European people, if we look at very successful, very super healthy, super athletes, they're doing a lot of what we call biohacking. Okay.
How do you spell it? How do you say it?
biohacking, biohacking.
Okay.
Okay. And what the biohacking is doing is it's working on cellular levels. Now, we're talking about high pressure oxygen. So this is why runners in Kenya and runners, let's say, in Northern Europe do really well, because they're running naturally in a high oxygen, like high pressure oxygen environment. So we're using systems to increase our body's natural ability to do things.
Right.
So that would be one example. Another one is a red light. We know that red light, which is like near ultraviolet, when you show red light to the body or to the skin or expose ourselves to it, increases the amount of energy that can go to our mitochondria. So mitochondria are, the little cells in our body, or the little chemicals in our body that carries the energy. So by exposing it to red light, it activates it and it gets our energy in our body naturally more active. So if my natural cells are more active in their energy state, I can do more, I can feel better, I can heal faster, I can train harder. Infrared sauna, which we know, this is where, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, right, they've got all the hot pools and those natural volcanic pools and things like that, and the ice cold waters, and they cold plunge and they hot pool. Those are elements of biohacking, where we're waking ourselves up, keeping them energized, and talking to them on a level where your body goes, oh, this feels great. I can work harder because you're putting in things. So in some elements, in some places in the world, like I said, these are things you can find in nature. You can go probably to Scandinavia and walk from an ice cold lake probably into a nice warm geyser and alternate and do hot and cold plunge, which is really great for your body. In North America, however, obviously we're living in a very metropolis lifestyle, very busy lifestyle. So we have pods and mechanisms and things that are made that can mimic this. So we have a high pressure oxygen chamber where you're just lying in higher pressure. We're not giving you more oxygen. What we're doing is, by putting you under an appropriate amount of pressure that's not dangerous, the oxygen your body's taking in can be absorbed easier. So if I put more oxygen in my body for this hour, it's more likely able to do its job for the hour. It's going to heal up quicker. It's going to clean up cellular debris. It's going to do antioxidant stuff. Now we add to that what we call maybe brain tap. Brain tap is using different light waves and music and different sounds to allow our brain to get into different states. So again, we could do this in nature. Go take a walk and listen to the birds. That would be regenerative or calming, right? Scientists have figured out certain light waves, certain musical patterns that can mimic that. So I like lying in the oxygen chamber. Sometimes just on a Sunday evening, I'll go live for 1 hour. I'm not taking it from anybody else, and it's kind of like a regeneration before the week of work.
Would that be in your house?
No, I need to go to the clinic. So we have it at the clinic, and you would come to the clinic and use it there.
And how often would you do that?
I tend to do it about once a week because that's the time I make for it. So here's me not prepared to make more time.
Yeah.
The ideal would probably be about twice a week for about an hour.
Right.
Right. Longer stretches tend to allow the body to absorb the oxygen and slowly do what it needs to without just blasting, shorter sessions which are not worth it. So it is time consuming in the sense that an hour to 90 minutes is more beneficial, as opposed to quick 20-minute sessions, which are not going to achieve much.
Right.
Yeah. Really good for brain injured patients. So we have an MMA patient that trains, and he occasionally will get head injuries from training and competitions. And when he does, and when he's healing from that, he'll come in more frequently and do an hour 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
He's spending that time, let's say, in a calm, meditative way.
Right.
He's putting more oxygen into his body, which allows his brain to heal up. And then we will add the brain taps of the light in usually a green light in certain wavelengths. It gets shines, your eyes are closed, and it goes through your eyelids, and it's helping the brain get into a calm, regenerative state.
Right.
So we're adding these components to the medicine, to skincare, right, which the ladies love and we all love. None of us want to really look our age. Let's be real. I mean, it's not like we're saying aging is bad. No. But we have choices and you can make them. But those are add-on things. But really, from if you want to live young and die young, you're going to die young in old age. You're going to incorporate these things as well. Yeah. Many people do. So many people might have, let's say, an infrared sauna in their house. Yeah. So that would be similar to the red light. And I know many patients have bought those, and they'll do an hour in the evening, every evening. Yeah. Many people might have a portable cold plunge at home. Yeah. So you would do your infrared sauna and maybe cold plunge. Interestingly enough, cold plunge is the one with the least amount of science, though. Maybe because it's new, that they just don't have as much science. We know from a muscle perspective, it feels really good on the muscles, and it allows less, lactic acid to just be sitting there and that kind of thing. But it's less scientific to its longevity benefits as opposed to its sports benefits at the time. Right. But doing those things, and again, just being consistent. I'm not saying do it every day. No. Once a week, as often as you can, and you will reap the benefits long term.
So if you have now aged less, for the people that are wondering about it, you can go on the... You can go online. They have a website. You can do... And we have a couple of different programs there. But honestly, I usually just say call Lindsay. She is my fabulous office manager in Kelowna. agelessliving.com. But you can, if you look up Ageless Living, there's only one of us in Kelowna. Chat with Lindsay. And what she'll do is, if you're not sure if any of this is right for you, she'll book you in for a quick 10 or 20-minute chat with myself or Jason, and we can tell you about the programs and how they work for you. Whether you be in Kelowna, whether you be in Langley, whether you be in Victoria, my patients are spread all through southern BC. Yeah, and so it is all... further evolving as we speak about quality of life. Yes. And becoming knowledgeable and aware of. So if I look around the world, and again thinking Europe, Sweden, and some of the other places, hormones again. Yes. Very, very important. Yes. Understanding your body cells, sexuality, and all of those issues. Very, very important for people, right? It's interesting how I think medicine just never, science always understood. So that's why I say medicine never understood. Medicine being the lay physicians that are running the show. The scientists have known this for a very long time, that the reason things go wrong in our middle and older age is partially because of hormone changes. With men, it's not quite as dramatic as with women. We all know what we call menopause and the perimenopause and what women are going through. But really, in the 1920s, your expected life would have been maybe to 55, 60, 65, right? So just speaking of women, because I do a lot of women's hormones, you would have had your kids between the age of 15 and 25. And our bodies are actually designed to have our children at that age. Nowadays as North Americans, we spawn when we go, a 16-year-old having a child. It sounds ridiculous, but from a biological standpoint, our body is maximally designed to have children between the age of 15 and 25. Between 25 and 45, you would be at your most active stage of your life, your productive active stage.
When you get to 45, with your child now being about 20, you would go into that, I'm going to really kind of butcher this, but you would go into your degenerative and dying stage. Okay, so at 45, you're now grandparenting. Okay, we're usually in multi-generational families, so at that point still parents may have lived with children or may have lived alongside them. Everybody was doing things together. It would be quite matriarchal, at least for the woman. Mom helps grandma, helps the daughter, everybody's, you know, doing the bread together, helping with the laundry, helping with the chores. So there's a shared distribution of work. And in that 45 to 55, the woman would slowly get to kind of that grandparenting stage and then, you know, die out. And the body is okay with that, which is why, as medicine went on, we were like, well, what's the big deal with menopause? What's the big deal with hormones? Right now, we could expect to live, if we look after ourselves, 85 to 95. Okay, so now suddenly I'm spending 40 years in my degenerate or dying stage. It's not realistic.
No.
Nothing will work for 40 years when it's in its broken stage, right? Our life has been pushed so far forward that we have to be able to maintain our body where it is in that functional state if we want to maintain any quality of life.
Yeah.
And prevent disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why the hormones are getting so much more attention. Luckily, people are starting to talk about it.
And that likely could well exceed 100 years.
It may.
You know, 100 now for a lot of times being an exception to the normal rule. It likely will not be 10, 15, 20 years from now.
No, where that is the expectation.
Yes.
Right? And if we're not doing the hormones and these other mechanisms, because as life is also moving on, we know that all of the things that we're exposed to in life are evolving and changing.
Yeah.
So we're at a time in life where we're exposed to more toxins, more negative energy, more negative stimuli than ever, right? We talk about being online and all of the digitalization of life. Our brains are not designed to function in this excessively digitalized world.
Yeah.
It cannot keep up.
Yeah.
It's very exhausting for our brain. It really perpetuates ADHD, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing that, leaving our brain hyper-stimulated, and we're thinking we're going to make it to the end if we're not figuring out ways. And not everybody wants to do yoga, and not everybody wants to journal. That may work for a percentage of people, but we have to be doing these other things if we expect to make it to the end.
On the other hand, you know, kind of looking from my own perspective, you know, being nearly mid-80s, makes me pretty well the oldest one in my family ever.
Yeah.
You know, saying that but I've known a lot of people in their 70s, and you know that they kind of said, "I don't know why I'm alive."
Yeah, and unfortunately,
I don't
I
enjoy
see that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not necessary.
I used to joke with my patients actually, and I mean this is in a kind of fun way to say, when you get to 50, it seems like you should just start counting down. Because by the time you're getting to 90 and you're getting to 100, it looks like you have to be cared for again like a baby, kind of like when you were 0 and 1 years old. You know, when you look at the people around you, they very few are aging with grace and with any kind of having any quality of life. It honestly, many of my patients looked like they were being tortured still being alive. And they would have wanted to have felt better, but then didn't understand how they could do that, or never had the option to learn.
That all being said then, Tracey, is the message we give everybody and our guests watching and everybody else either reading our books, is saying, because the system is what it is, and saying that universality and does not necessarily include being proactive in a structured sense, and so, but there is no reason that people do not with internet and all the information that is available, you can get information.
Yeah.
There are ways in which we can supplement what we already have.
Yes.
You know, by either reading books or becoming members of Ageless or other
Yes.
organizations like
Yeah.
that are being very proactive.
Yes.
In terms of, you know, the healthy living, don't smoke, don't drink, do all those other things are virtually no-brainers.
Yes.
Right? But healthy living should not be excluded to anybody or not being. People can understand it, and the results are amazing.
They are. And I mean, luckily now with social media, and there are many, many platforms with free content. You know, we look at YouTube, we look at Instagram and those places. I don't do a lot of social media, so I can't really list off the others. But there are many reputable physicians, many reputable people in health who are putting content out there which you can access for free. You can sit at any public library, you could sit at most cafes. There's free internet, there may be free access to computers at public libraries where you can access the information. And even if you're sometimes confused by some of it, you can choose to take action on one thing alone, right? You can go, okay, I'm gonna pick this one thing that I do understand and start with that. And then from there, keep researching. And there's you know, there's platforms that you pay for and you speak to medical professionals and things like that, but there is a lot of information as well. Even just following podcasts you do, the guests that you have on, right? Listening to what we say and then spending some time maybe researching what we say so that you can understand it. Exactly. It's there and the choice is there, but people have to make the choice.
And then the other part about it, at least from my perspective, at 60 years old, and I was not perfect before that, and saying, well, you must always be there. No, I wasn't. Mm-hmm. You know, so it was
and if they go back to Against All Odds, your first book, you know, we speak of this one now, and what you've achieved is phenomenal. But I would love for patients or people listening, go back and read John's first book, because when you read his first book, it teaches you that we're all human.
Yeah.
And even as great as you are today, you failed many times.
Yeah.
You chose to mess up many times.
Yes.
You chose the wrong path many times. And we've all done that. And yet, you chose to also be proactive and make changes.
Yeah.
And this is where you've achieved so much despite that. So nobody has an excuse to say, I can't do it.
And then the other part, I have an obligation to share it with others, not to say, hey, look at me compared to you. That's not the story. This simply is for the purpose of saying, you can do it as well.
Yeah. You're saying, look at me. I'm only talking about me and what I did and how I did it and why I did it.
Exactly.
And whether that inspires other people, that's what we're hoping to achieve.
And that's exactly what it is. You know, so it is available to everybody. Tracey.
Thank you so much, John. We could go on for hours.
I'm going to give you a big hug.
My hands are cold. No, I like keeping them colder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, you know, love to have you here, and
thank you so much.
you know, and we'll stay in touch, obviously. And thank you for being my guest. And
it was my greatest pleasure.
Yeah, and you know, and for all of those people watching our podcast and speaking about health and fitness and all the other things so important in life, if you like what we are doing and you want to see more of it, subscribe to us and share it with others, like it, comment on it. And for Tracey, ageless.com.
Ageless Living.
Ages.
Living.
Aging.
Agelessliving.com.
Agelessliving.com. Thank you very much. And Tracey, love to have you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.